Today's the day. We're at Tesla, and it's Model 3 day. And just take a look in the parking lot before we even get in. Have you seen all the Teslas? Micah, take a little show around here. There's a couple with haven't even had the plastic taken off. That looks like an S though. All right, let's walk to the front door. Show who we're with. They're excited. We're with the boys. All right, got the sign. We're going through the door. It says delivery. We're doing this thing. We're doing this thing. Can we video you guys?
Yes, you can video.
Excellent. All right, today's the big day. This is the mic. All right.
It's a big day.
We're excited. How many times have you done this today?
Oh, many.
Many?
Quite a few.
Thousands? Hundreds?
Not quite thousands, but today...
Millions.
Yeah, today around 40
That's good.
people have been through already, and we have quite a few to go.
Excellent.
Absolutely. What is your name, sir?
Herbert is the last name.
Herbert. Oh,
Yep.
Mel.
Yes.
All right, perfect. We get you all checked in here, and Cameron is going to be
Hi,
your
Cameron. How are you, Cameron?
document
Nice to
signer.
meet you.
Excellent.
I'm going to be walking you through the boring part. Feel free to follow me.
Can we still video this whole thing?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Just so you're aware, do you want to use the restroom first?
No, I'm good. Do you guys know? No? Oh, big scanning. Oh, this is very slick in here.
I also have some nice coffee shop over here.
Oh my.
If you want coffee, tea,
Wow.
whatever you want.
Wow. Okay. So you do all your paperwork, and they take you out the back, they quickly show you through the car, and there's a whole bunch of other cars there, and they want to get you out of there fast, so then they take you out to the parking lot. Here's your car. Thank you very much. Get out of here. We've got to deliver 1 million more. So here we are. We've got the Model 3 to the left, the Model S to the right. There's been a lot of videos made about the Model 3 already, some really excellent walkthroughs that are over an hour long. So we don't want to just sort of do the same thing again. We want to put our own spin on it. So I want to do just a quick overview of of the Model 3. We've only had it for less than 24 hours, 12 hours. Quick overview of it. And then I want to do some comparing with Model S, because I think a lot of people will be deciding, should I get the Model 3, should I get the Model S? And just straight up front, they're a very different car. It's smaller, it's beautiful. This has more tech, much larger, and it certainly feels much larger after you've driven this even for like 50 miles and you hop into that car and you're like, this is a gigantic car. The first thing I want to do is sort of look at the size of the car, and it's really hard to do until you're actually physically standing here. But as we look at the cars front on, the Model 3 is narrower, but it doesn't look that much narrower just face on, but it is narrow. You feel it when you're actually sitting in the car and you're trying to park and you're trying to move around. So it's physically narrower. The other thing from the outside, if we look at the windshields, if we shoot this way, again, you don't get a sense for it, but when you're in the car, this glass coming all the way down to here and the way that it's set up, there is so much visibility out of here, even compared to the S, and I would say even compared to the X. You can see so much more out of this car because this also seems to drop off faster than on the S, so it sort of gets out of the way. Now, if we do for the length of the car, I've tried to line them up sort of straight at the front here. So now let's look how much is at the back. So as we come to the back here, the S, if we look down here, it's significantly longer. So it's longer, it's wider, and the views out the front though of the 3 is definitely superior. So let's just go to the trunk. Maybe that's a weird place to start, but that was something I was really interested in before we got the Model 3, like how much trunk room is there going to be? So you manually lift this trunk, and the first thing you're going to notice is that this is much smaller than the S. Let me open the hatch on the S. So there's a lot of crap and stuff in the back of my S, but it's a huge opening. You can put a whole bunch of stuff in there. So that's one thing that for some people might be a big deal. This is not a hatchback, it's much more a traditional car, and so you're going to be able to put in a lot less stuff. The upside, of course, is it's a smaller car. It's easy to drive around, but that's one thing to consider. But that only comes on the S. I wish they had have done a hatch on the Model 3. I'm not sure why they did that. but there is certainly a lot of room in here. It goes way back in here, and if you drop the seats, there's a lot of room, and there's also in here, this well is a very good size. So there's actually a lot of room, but you can't really compare it against the Model S. The Model S is just way bigger in terms of getting stuff in there. All right, so I'm getting my crappy golf clubs out of this car. Just want to give you a sense of, here's that. Fits in there pretty well with the seats up. Oh, this is the most important test for me. I haven't done this yet. Fits in there just fine, although I cheated because I got the seat down. Let me go put that seat up. So it passes the golf club test. Remarkable. That's the most important thing, is that you can get your golf clubs in the back of your car. It's actually a good way to show you the size of the trunk, which for a lot of people is a big deal. Obviously a little harder to access, as we talked about, but we've passed the golf club test. That's fine. So getting into the car. Now there's lots of videos on this already. You know that you have your key card. We're going to talk a lot about that key card because I think it's going to bring up some issues. This is attached to my phone. We're actually using the camera here as the phone. And so you just walk up to the car, and these door handles, it's funny because if you already have an S, you go up and you're like, why isn't the door handle coming out? You're used to your superpowers, the force. You go like this and they just open if you've got that version of the car. But in this is very easy to pop open, and it pops out really nicely. And then you can enter the car. And the first thing you notice is that the entry is really easy. And actually I think it's easier to get into than the S, and I don't know why. I'm not smart enough yet to have worked out why it feels easier to get into this car than to the S. There's lots of room in here, and we just did the software update that's on both the S and the X as well, which is easy entry, where you can set it to put the steering wheel up, the chair all the way back when you put it into park, so that you can get easily in and out. The problem with that is that if you're just sort of want to stop and you're picking somebody up, for example, and you put it in park, your chair goes flying back and this goes up, and you may not want that. So you can go over to the touch screen and turn that off. But let's see if we can give you a sense of how well you can see out of the car here. If we hand it over to me, I'm going to put this where I'm sitting, and you can see really well out of this car. There's just an enormous, beautiful view out the front of this car. Part of it's because the binnacle display is not there, of course, and you don't have sort of that hump. But you have this beautiful view through the car, and to me that's the single most impressive thing I've seen so far. That this little car has this beautiful ability to see everything in front of you. Now again, people have talked a lot about this 15-inch screen here, and a couple of things to say very quickly. It is beautiful. It seems to be significantly higher resolution and more dynamic range than in the S or in the X. People say, what about the binnacle display? You do very quickly get used to looking over here to see the things that you need to see, like how fast you're driving, for example. But I will say that I don't think this is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, because although I can see all my driving stuff here and it's been great, when I want to look at directions, which I do a lot, I find it when I'm driving a little bit hard to see some of these directions, whereas in the S and in the X, when it's vertical like this and it's actually tilted towards the driver, it's a lot easier. I don't know why, but I wish they had this so that you could actually physically grab this, and just if you're driving by yourself, a couple of clicks this way would make that so much better. They obviously had their reasons, and maybe it was just because one size fits all, or that's just another point of breakage. But I would really love to see it in the future to make this a little bit more useful. Turn it towards me. Now, all of this in here is about future tech. It's about self-driving cars, but we know we're not there yet, and we know that we're not going to have a fully self-driving Tesla for, I think, a few years. I think Elon overstated in the early days about how quick that would come. Maybe something magic's going to happen this year, but until this car is truly self-driving, I'm going to be looking at those directions a lot. I would love to be able to move this thing, and this thing is on there solid. I mean, it's not going to get ripped off, but it would be so nice to be able to click this. Otherwise, people have talked a lot about sort of the smoothness here and how well the venting and stuff works, and I got to say, I agree with it. The other thing that I'm impressed with is the amount of rear space. When you sit in the back of this car, there's actually quite a lot of space in the back of this car compared to the S. So let's jump over to to the S for a second and just sit in the same spot and highlight some of those differences again. Obviously we're in the S, and I don't know if it comes out in the video, but just your field of vision in this car, even though it's wider and it's a little taller, I think, you just don't see out as well. You've got this big binnacle display which pops up here. You can see the hood of the car more. It just is much lower down in the Model 3, and you can just see much better, and I really like that about the Model 3. But here's what I'm saying about the center display. It's slightly tilted this way, and because of the vertical orientation, when you're getting directions, the directions are right here, and so I can see them very easily. Whereas in that 3, again, they were over on that side, a little harder to see. And that, you know, the binnacle display, obviously, where we have all this other stuff, I can live without that, but I really wish I could take that Model 3 screen and just tip it one way a little bit, and I'd be fine with it. But otherwise, you know, in terms of the space inside the car, this is bigger, and it does feel bigger inside the car, but if you don't need a big car, and I personally don't need a big car like this, I much prefer the size of the 3. Okay, so we're going to go for a little bit of a drive here. It's saying down here that there's something wrong with my charger. I'm basically just charging from a standard 120 volt.
Well, but it does say extension cord used or bad wiring, and you did use an
I
extension
did use an extension cord, and I don't like that. But okay, I got it. I want to turn this off. I can't make it go away. All right, so on our way home from the delivery center, Autopilot cameras were calibrating. Ugh, can't get my words out. The Autopilot was calibrating, and that's done. So when we get on the freeway, we'll try for the first time using Autopilot in the 3. In terms of the drive, obviously people are going to want to know about how does it feel. It feels like a Tesla. I mean, it's zippy. We're going to zip a little bit here. I mean, that is zippy. Is it as fast as a P100D? Ludicrous? No, but that's a ridiculous speed anyway. It feels in this car a little bit tighter in the suspension, because this has got coil suspension in this current version, and the S has air suspension, the version that I have, and that feels a little bit less tight. I really like air suspension, and I like the fact that you can change it. So obviously that's one of the things that in the future you're going to be able to get on a Model 3. And for some people that is it's a game changer to have air suspension because of the way they drive into their house, for example. Doesn't have air suspension for now, but in the future we expect to see that. Doesn't have dual motors yet, just has a single rear motor for now. Dual motor version we know is actually coming later in the year. Again, for some people really important, particularly in areas where there's a lot of snow. They like that all-wheel drive. Some people also like it because it gives you more power, so the next version with the dual motors we expect will have faster pickup. And the other reason for dual motors is, at least in the past, dual motors has meant even more range, you know, maybe 10% more range. So it's possible that you could have a 350 mile Model 3 with the dual motor in the future, but we'll wait and see. Again, just as we're driving, I don't know if you get the sense, but I can see out of this window so well, and it feels like a sports car in terms of that responsiveness for when you put your foot on the accelerator. Definitely also feels, and this is what I really like about the Model 3, it feels much smaller in terms of I can see everywhere. It's narrower. This feels like a car I'm not going to ding as much. I got to tell you, my Model S, there's little dings all around it because I can, even though I've had a Model 3S for 4 years, I still have not worked out how wide it is. It just seems to me quite a wide car. Beautiful car, don't get me wrong. But this, for me, it's very personal. A smaller car is nicer. Most of the time it's me, one other person, and a set of golf clubs. This is plenty big enough for me. So let's get this up to freeway speeds here. And you know, it's just freeway speeds in LA, which is most of the time not very fast at all. Do a bit of merging. And do another merge here. That torque that you have in the S is the same in the 3. You know, you're at 50 miles an hour and you gun it, it goes really fast. So can we engage Autopilot? Well, let's see. No, I don't know why. I thought it had actually...
Steer speed.
so maybe it hasn't calibrated yet. No. It's seeing cars, it's seeing the speed limit, or it's telling us the speed limit.
So, do it again. Let's see what the error is. Additional driving required for camera calibration.
Oh, so it's not
auto
calibrated.
steer max speed is limited, so it won't go at 65
Right.
miles an hour. But
Okay.
it was trying to do it earlier at.
Okay, so we'll get off the freeway and see if we can get onto a street and do it. So that was pretty zippy. Feels super responsive. The steering is really nice. Again, it feels like a Tesla. It drives really well. We've got it on standard steering. You can do sport steering, you can do comfort. But it's very precise in terms of the steering. Regenerative braking is about the same as the S and the X. You take your foot off the accelerator, it starts to slow itself and regenerate. I really like that. It saves a lot of brakes over time. Now auto steering is available, so let's engage it and see how we go here. It's hasn't calibrated fully. Let's see if it's going to stop. Oh yeah, it's stopping by itself. It's staying within lines. So obviously this calibration is incremental, so it'll let you do the side streets at slower speeds, but it wouldn't let us do it on the freeway. Over time, in the next few weeks, I'll play with it and give you a sense of how it compares to Autopilot in the S, which has Autopilot 2. I expect it will be the same, but it'll be interesting if it feels different. And anybody who's listened to the show knows that I think that Autopilot in the S, Autopilot 2.0 in the S right now drives like a drunken 15-year-old. It sort of goes all over the place, it's jerky, it's not smooth at all. Whereas Autopilot 1, which we have in the X, is pretty slick. It stays in the lanes really well, it accelerates and decelerates really smoothly, so Autopilot 2.0 has a long way to go. Elon has said coming really soon is a major update to the machine learning for Autopilot, and but he's been saying that a lot for the last 6 months, so we'll see. But so far it seems to be at least as good as in the S, and I would dare suggest even, let's see how this goes, that braking was smoother. It's not going. This is a pretty easy, this would be the easiest type of auto steering you'll ever do. It's just going straight. The lines are pretty well marked. It's seeing them pretty well. In terms of the driver experience, it would be, I can just see this really easily. I was worried that since it's not in the binnacle display, this would be distracting, but this certainly, this third of this display feels like it's very easy to see. This third, not so easy to see, and I find that's the one downside, is that I can't see over here very well. I wish, I just have this desire to just grab this thing and turn it towards me. I really don't know why they did that. And it won't stop the light, so don't do that. To disengage the autopilot, to engage autopilot, you just have the drive stick, so reverse, the usual stuff, neutral drive, and autopilot is engaged by double tapping down, and to disengage it is one tap all the way up, or you can do the usual, grab the steering wheel, put your foot on the brake, will disengage it. So what I'd really like to see in a future software update, for example, and I'm sure this will come, is the ability to change some of this. So what I would do is I'd take this and I'd pinch and I'd squeeze it down a little bit, give myself a little bit more space here on the map, and I'd move this and I'd swish it over to this side.
Doesn't like them.
Okay, it's engaged now. Double tap down. Little jerkiness. Look at this. It's wavy lines. This is how the S used to be. So these are cameras that are not calibrated yet. So I expect that's going to get better, but it's way off.
Turn it off.
This thing is way off.
It was fine before though. I think it's just because it's the yellow line.
Yeah. So this is a really important point, and I say this on the show, and I say this now. Don't trust auto steer. I see people now that are basically texting and drinking a cup of coffee with Autopilot on the freeway, and I think that's incredibly dangerous. This is new technology. It is not ready for prime time. If you're on a big long drive and you want to put it on just like you would cruise control, but you're still fully engaged with the experience and you're just using it to take a bit of that pressure off to, it's basically staying in the lane and you're looking for the deer and stuff that's going to run through, that's a perfectly appropriate thing. But it is just not ready for you to be considering this level 4 or level 5 driving. You have to be engaged or you will get into a car accident. I'm absolutely convinced of that. It's just not ready yet. It's something we talk about all the time on the show. Should Tesla not roll this out? Should turn it off? Or they can't turn it off now, but Google has got a different philosophy, and that is we're going to make it perfect and then we're going to roll it out, because people are going to think it's perfect or act like it's perfect when it's really not. So I know I harp on the show all the time, but don't trust auto steer. Use it the way it's supposed to be used, which is like enhanced cruise control. That's all it is. Don't be texting and driving even though you've got your auto steer on. Okay, so one of the things that I didn't really notice on other people's reviews, and maybe I should have, is that there is a handle here that opens the car. And for a lot of people that have already got in the car, that's the natural thing to do, is to pull this handle up. And that works, it opens the door. But when you do that, and you go over here, it says, using the emergency door as a release may damage the window. So, okay, great that they've got an emergency release, but a bummer because it's so natural, because people are used to doing this. Just a lot of people naturally put their hand, they perhaps should have put it somewhere else. What you're supposed to use is this one and open it, and then you don't get that error. But it really doesn't like me using this charge cord with an extension cable. But too bad. I wish it would go away. I think that's a bit of a bug. So, final thoughts. This is a beautiful car. It's a Tesla. It goes 310 miles. They're going to sell 1 trillion of these. For people that are interested in a high-range electric car, this is the one to get. It's still too expensive for a lot of people, but I just think it's a beautiful car. It drives well. It's the size that many of us would prefer than the S. The real question, I think, is how many people like me who own an S, whose next car is not going to be another S. It's going to be a Model 3, or at least until they come out with Model Y, which is the car I really want. We'll do a lot more of these videos in the coming few weeks because there's so much to go over. This was just a taste of what this car's all about. Herbert out.